You ever meet someone so rich, so arrogant, that they start believing they're untouchable? Well, my old boss was exactly that. He thought he could cheat his employees, cheat the government, and even poison the ground we walk on without consequences. He was wrong. If you've ever worked for a boss who thought they were a god, smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you believe karma has a way of catching up. And stick around because this isn't just a story about quitting a job. This is about tearing down a tyrant. Brick by brick. I want you to picture the year 2003. I was a machinist. By trade, skilled, experienced, respected. When the company I had worked at shut down, I wasn't worried. Within a single day, I landed another job at a company we'll call Spiral. Now, Spiral was no ordinary workshop. They specialized in custom tools, precision, detail, craftsmanship, the kind of stuff that makes or breaks industries. It was owner-operated too, which meant the guy who founded it, the so-called self-made millionaire, was in the building every single day. At first, it didn't seem bad. The floor supervisor was fair, decent, even supportive. But then, not even a year into my time there, the supervisor and the owner had a falling out. The supervisor walked out. And who did the owner point to as the replacement? Me. That sounds like a step up, right? A vote of confidence? No, it was a trap. The owner's name? Let's call him Dick because, frankly, there's no better word for him. Dick had started Spiral decades earlier in his garage. Back in his 20s, he'd been a hustler. I'll give him that. He bought up a massive piece of land and turned it into an industrial park. By the time I met him, he was one of the richest men in the entire state. But here's the thing about some self-made millionaires. They forget about everyone else who helped them get there. They start believing they're gods, above rules, above morality. That was Dick. He treated his employees like trash, like tools he could use, then toss. Yelled at us for talking. He squeezed every drop of productivity out of us while paying the absolute bare minimum. Benefits? Forget it. Job security? Not a chance, but me. For some reason, he treated me slightly better. Maybe because I had skills he couldn't replace. Maybe because he liked bragging to me. But in a way that made it worse. Because while he was bragging, he told me things. Things that stuck in my head. Things that would later destroy him. When people like Dick get comfortable, they get careless. He'd sit in his office, lean back, and spew arrogance. He bragged about how he cooked the books. See, the industrial park was owned by one of his companies. Spiral was owned by another. He'd deliberately inflate the rent Spiral had to pay, so it always looked like the company was barely scraping by. That way, he laughed, I never pay too much in taxes. But that wasn't the worst part. Oh no. He bragged about burying industrial waste on his personal property. Actual toxic material. Costs a hell of a lot less than disposing of it properly. He chuckled. Do you know how twisted you have to be to brag about poisoning the land your kids, your grandkids will walk on just to save a buck? For the next decade, this man made my life a nightmare. My pay was always just enough to keep me there, but never enough to escape. I wanted to leave, but the way he set it up was financially trapped in the employees. We had a 95% turnover rate. That's not an exaggeration. People would quit constantly, and we'd scramble to replace them. Even had to use temp agencies, till even they refused to send people anymore. Imagine being so awful that temp agencies whose business is literally sending workers to jobs say no thanks. Dick didn't care. He'd laugh, scream, throw tantrums, thought he was invincible. But here's the thing about surviving 10 years under someone like that. You learn, you adapt, you get smarter. Carefully expanded my responsibilities. I convinced him to let me use the title plant manager. That doesn't sound huge, but in the job world, it was massive. I had no college degree, but now I had both a title and experience. That was my golden ticket. I started job hunting in secret. 6 months later, I landed something better. Higher pay. Actual benefits. Respect. But I knew I couldn't just leave quietly. See, every time someone quit Spiral, Dick would throw them out immediately. No 2 weeks, no goodbyes, just get out. He wanted control. always. My new company wanted me to give 2 weeks, but I wasn't about to risk it. So I made a plan. On my last day, I kept calm, did my work, smiled at Dick like everything was normal. But inside, I was burning with 10 years of pent-up rage. At the end of my shift, I sat down at my desk. I wrote emails. Not angry rants, not emotional pleas. Cold, methodical, precise. One email to the head of OSHA, another to the state's EPA office, and a third to the state attorney. I told them everything Dick had bragged to me about. The cooked books, the tax fraud, the illegal waste buried in his backyard. And because I'd spent years getting to know these officials through inspections, I had their personal contacts. They knew me. They trusted me. When the emails were sent, I pulled my keys out of my pocket, laid them on the desk, and placed a single sheet of paper underneath. 3 words. I quit. Then I walked out the door. I never saw Dick again, but I heard the aftermath. My OSHA contact reached out to thank me. Spyro was hit with $150,000 in fines for willful safety violations. The EPA, they went digging literally. They tore up half of Dick's property before he finally confessed where the waste was buried, and the state attorney. I never got confirmation on how far they went, but rumors spread fast. Last I heard, Dick went to jail. Let me tell you, walking out of that place wasn't just quitting a job. It was liberation. 10 years of abuse, humiliation, and manipulation lifted off my shoulders in one single act. And the best part? The man who thought he was untouchable, the man who believed money and power made him immune to consequences, was brought down by his own arrogance. By the very words he bragged to me in confidence. That's the thing about people like Dick. They don't just create their own downfall. They brag about it while doing so. Justice doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes it takes years. But when it lands, it's unstoppable. And if you've ever worked for someone like Dick, you know. The sweetest victories are the ones you don't even have to watch. You just know they happened. So what about you? Have you ever had a boss who thought they were untouchable? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. And if this tale of poetic justice made you smile, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to believe in karma again. Because remember, greed might build an empire, but arrogance always tears it down.